and welcome to A Little Bit Forward. I'm Simon Waller. This is the show where we don't give you any answers whatsoever and instead just pose some interesting questions that maybe challenge some of our preconceived notions about how our world, how our work, and how our lives operate. Today, we're going to be talking about the concept of best practice, and is best practice really good enough? And on the surface, seems like a crazy question to ask, because if it's best practice, then obviously it's the best, and we couldn't do any better. And so therefore, we should really stop trying. But when you hear the term best practice, the first thing that comes to mind should be, says who? Unfortunately, often best practice is self-proclaimed. It's claimed by the person who is practicing that practice for quite selfish reasons. And if it's not that, it might be that it's the best practice that you could find in a limited search, but rarely would it actually represent the very best practice we could find around the world. If we're really lucky, the person who is claiming best practice might have an award attached to the name. But again, the chance of that award being appointed by judges on a criteria that's broader than just your ability to fill out the nomination form is highly unlikely. And this may seem just like corporate puffery, like it's just exaggeration and relatively harmless, but I do actually believe that claims of best practice can be actually quite damaging. When I was at Rio Tinto, I worked in business improvement, and as part of that, I was a lean coach and I did my Six Sigma training. And if you do your Six Sigma training at Rio, one of the ways of achieving your kind of green belt or your accreditation is you need to deliver a project that have at least $1 million worth of recurring value back to Rio each year. And one of the showcase projects I saw when I was there was a project around tweaking some of the settings on the conveyor belts on the mine plant. And that tweak in the conveyor belts delivered $1 million of extra throughput to Rio. What was really interesting, though, was this was a showcase project. They had proved that it worked on one of their mine sites, and because this was now considered best practice, the intent was to roll that out across all the other mines that Rio operated. They went to the next mine, and they made the same tweaks to the same conveyor belt setup, and all they found out was the whole thing went slower. That best practice on one site didn't necessarily transfer to best practice on another site. They did a lot of analysis to try and work out why this was the case. And what they finally concluded was that the other mine site had different rocks. Now, this may seem like a weird conclusion to come to, especially given that every mine site, of course, has different rocks. But what it highlights is the problematic nature of best practice. Because what is best practice in one place is not necessarily best practice somewhere else. We can't just cut and paste best practice and assume that it's going to work. So this is the work done by Dave Snowden. And he talks about the difference between simple, complicated, and complex and chaotic systems. And best practice only sits and works well in very simple systems. In theory, there could be best practice in a complicated system, but they're so complicated, the amount of time and energy it would take to work out what best practice is probably isn't worth it. And so in that type of circumstances, we're probably aiming just for better practice. When you get to, though, the concept of emergent systems and complex systems, so basically any system that involves a human being in it, these are dynamic systems, and what works one day may not work the best. You cannot pursue the idea of best practice and have it land and be static. You need something called emergent practice, where we keep trying new things and adapting as we go. And I do think this is where we kind of come to the problem around best practice. On one hand, it becomes a static thing. It's this idea that we can set and forget, and that in doing so, what may work well now will slowly deteriorate over time. But also, I think the intent around choosing best practice and implementing best practice in the first place is actually often born out of laziness. Like, we don't want to do the work to truly understand how the system operates, and so we just do cut and paste. We claim best practice, and the claim itself is lazy as well. And so here's the questions I'd like you to ponder over the next few minutes of silence. There's 5 minutes or so of silence tacked onto the end of this episode to give you that time and space to think. So where is it in your organization that you have seen best practice implemented badly? That you've seen best practice implemented in such a way that it doesn't actually deliver the outcomes that it's meant to? Second of all, what is the difference in outcome between doing the lazy approach, the cut and paste approach, and truly understanding? There's a trade-off to be made. Understanding takes time, but in theory, it results in better outcomes. Where do you sit on that trade-off? Think about the projects around you and what would help you deliver them better.